Last Night in Soho is an idea that I've been thinking about for more than a decade. And it's something that kind of kept sort of rattling around inside me, mostly because I've spent an enormous amount of time in Soho working and more recently living as well. So it was something as the idea for the story, I just couldn't escape it because it was something that I was like looking at every day. It kind of grew from being like an idea that I'd had that I kept to myself, that then I told my producer Naira Park about. And then eventually you start sort of telling it to people, not in like pitch meetings so much as like pitching it to them in a pub. And one of those people was Krysty Wilson-Cairns, who I said, "Oh, can I take you out into Soho one night and tell you this idea for a film that I've had?"
I loved Soho. Like when I first moved to London, I sort of had stayed in the suburbs. And then when I got my chance, I lived above a strip club in Soho, right on Dean Street. And I worked at a bar around the corner. And I think there was a whole year where I didn't really leave Soho. And Soho is just such an interesting part of the world. It's like old meets new, kind of the artistic meets the very seedy. Yeah, it's a very specific place. And when Edgar was, talking about wanting to shoot a movie there and set a movie there, like, he just told me as a friend, and I was very excited to watch that film. And we went out and I took him to all the sort of dingy haunts that bartenders go to and some criminals.
Part of the reason to do the film was taking on the challenge of shooting in Soho and shooting in central London, because there's a reason that you haven't seen it on the big screen that much in the last 30 years, is because it's quite a difficult area to shoot in. And, occasionally you get big Hollywood movies that shoot in Trafalgar Square, but most of the time people keep out of central London because it's quite unmanageable. And so I think we went into the movie knowing that it was going to be incredibly ambitious and taking the bull by the horns. And really, it wouldn't have been that interesting to me to make the movie and have to fake Soho somewhere else. And so we did shoot all of Soho in Soho in the middle of summer. I mean, I have to give though full credit to our locations department, Camilla Stevenson. What she managed to do with the city of Westminster, which was an enormous help to us, was incredible. But a lot of that was because we had written the script. We knew exactly where we wanted to be, and we knew exactly where we wanted to be 8 months ahead, 6 months ahead. There's no way of doing something like this if you're trying to do it with like 4 weeks notice. You kind of have to give them like 6 months notice. It's like, we want to shoot in like Frith Street on this night. And that gets you kind of locked into a thing. It's like, well, it's now or never. This is when we're shooting in Soho. And so some nights I came to work and was standing in the middle of the street with all of the crew and cast around me thinking like, wow, I don't know if this is going to come together. Because the only way you can do it is to just kind of like put your production out there to the point where you push the real world out, even for 30 seconds, because you can maybe close streets to traffic and you can redress streets, and you can do that, and you can have the period cars and you can close the traffic, but you can't physically stop any member of the public walking through the shop.
I mean, my favourite location would obviously be the Toucan Bar, because I had spent about 10 years of my life working in the Toucan Bar, and then to go back there, we actually filmed in it. And there was times even during rehearsals when like Edgar Thomason and I went down and she learned how to pull a pint behind the bar, and it was really surreal to have those moments where you're like, oh yeah, I used to do that. In fact, I'm actually in the background of one of the shots as a bartender. I get cut around because I'm not very good on camera.
Sometimes when people ask the question, why cast Terence Stamp, Rita Tushingham, and Dame Diana Rigg, the question back is, why wouldn't you cast Rita Tushingham, Terence Stamp, and Dame Diana Rigg? I mean, the truth is that if you really love an actor, you just got to write a good part for them. When we were writing the script, some of these people kind of came to our mind in terms of who would be the perfect person to play this part. But I think beyond their connection to that decade, I think it's also about the weight and power they bring to London now, because the point of the movie is the reminder of like the sort of like the past is still with us. And it was sort of amazing in a way to kind of work with these people who were at the epicenter of the decade. It was an amazing thing just to kind of like to, in a way, like validate what we'd written by having some of these people play like characters. Like, for example, Rita Tushingham plays Thomasin McKenzie's grandmother. And it's like, such perfect casting. I say that in terms of I'm so happy that she's in it. Like, and I couldn't think of anybody better to play that part. And also, I totally buy that she's Thomasin's grandmother in the movie. And also, even if you think about, I showed Thomasin because Thomasin was only 18 when we started filming. And I showed her Rita Tushingham in A Taste of Honey. And Rita Tushingham was 18 when she made that movie. So Thomasin, after she watched Taste of Honey, was suddenly like, oh my God, we're in a scene with Rita Tushingham. So, I mean, I think for me and Krysty, it was like sort of one of those things where it's like thrilling and enjoyable. And also you never, you never stop thinking, oh, Terence Stamper's on set. I don't have a history with the festival. I think people assume that I do, but I've never had a film in the Toronto Film Festival. And I was there once as part of a lab, and then I spent a lot of time in Toronto shooting Scott Pilgrim. So I know the city very well. And it's very dear to me because, you know, I spent a year of my life there. So to actually be back and showing a film in the Toronto Film Festival finally is very exciting. So I'm really excited to be there. And also, I'm just happy to support cinemas generally and the big screen experience. And so for us to fly out to Canada and show this to real audiences sitting there is a thrill on a number of levels.
When I was in Toronto last time was for the press for 1917, and every reporter asked me about this movie with Edgar. It just felt like Toronto was absolutely like buzzing. And it was like, what, 2 years ago? We just wrapped, I think, shooting this film. So I'm very excited to come as a sort of accessory to someone who's well loved by Toronto.